We're ready to discuss, how do I start a generosity ministry? Now, as a way of reminder, you should have already previewed the training called What is a Generosity Ministry and Crafting a Generosity Ministry Vision. Now I want to help you launch a generosity ministry. And in this training, we're going to talk about leadership recruitment, timing, and resources available to you. I want to remind you that Generosity by LifeWay is here to provide everything you need as if you had a full-time generosity pastor on your team. So any of these tools that we've provided for you, feel free to pass them on to team leaders and members, even playing them in a ministry training setting. Let them be as helpful as they can possibly be to you. Let's talk about leadership first. Recruit a passionate person to lead the team. I would almost say you might need to recruit two people. One who can be passionate, be visionary, and manage a project, but also someone who might be more detail-oriented, because launching a ministry has many details. You might need to begin with the pastor first, or someone who's on the finance team or finance committee. You'll need someone who can lead and manage details, and when you have two people leading a team, you're already creating a leadership pipeline. So recruit a passionate person to lead the team. Next, create a cross-functional launch team. When I say cross-functional, I want you to remember that we've discussed we're not starting a class, but we're starting a ministry. And this ministry affects every ministry across the church and every age group. So you're going to want a team that represents all age group, all types of givers, and many ministries across the breadth of your church. A launch team, because you're launching a ministry, and oftentimes launching something requires a different kind of team than one that maintains or optimizes a ministry. Also, if you create it as a launch team, you're giving yourself a window to test leaders and not be stuck with maybe a team that didn't function as well over time. Let's recruit them to be a launch team to get us started and then have another redefining point after we've learned all that we need to learn. I would encourage you to enlist positive, flexible, supportive, growing, and generous people. You don't need people that are always high in the experience on finances or in banking or in accounting. Great people, but we want to lead with a cross-functional team that can represent families. How are they generous? Someone who's thinking of a teenager or a senior adult. Someone who might be thinking about how does generosity impact us in worship or in guest experiences. So think cross-functional, think positive, flexible, passionate people. Think across all ministry lines, and remember you're launching a generosity ministry, not a stewardship ministry. So create a cross-functional launch team. Next would be to host your first meeting. When you host your first meeting, you could easily have them watch the What is a Generosity Ministry training that you've already viewed. You could easily pass out the PDF applications and have some great discussion. You could then do the crafting of a generosity ministry vision if you would like. Or you could rely on the generosity theology training that you had in the generosity cycle. These documents could all be brought to the very first meeting in a draft form, and you could allow for discussion and input. It could be a great training and orienting time for the team. But host your first meeting and realize it's merely orientation, and we've provided you plenty of tools to create enough of an agenda to carry you through your very first meeting. Next, let's go on to timing. I want to relieve your pressure. There's no bad time to launch a generosity ministry. You're not doing a fundraiser. You're not doing a campaign or initiative. You could even start this in the summer and it would be okay. You're launching a long-term developmental growth plan of discipleship. So relax. There's no better time or no worse time to begin. Begin when you're ready, and that'll be great. Next, decide how you're going to launch the ministry. You might be launching the new digital giving platform by Generosity by LifeWay, and that may be an impetus to begin a generosity ministry. Or you might be in the middle of a budget approval or a new vision cast, and generosity is a key short-term goal for you, and this is a great way to launch into a ministry. Or you might just want to begin with a discipleship or a sermon message series. Anyway, it doesn't matter how you launch it, but decide how you want to launch a generosity ministry. Next, decide in advance what your next step follow-up will be. You're not launching a class, you're not launching an event, you're not launching a campaign or initiative. You're launching a long-term ministry. So as soon as the launch is over, what is the next logical step that you want to be ready for to help people continue on the path? Name that before you get started. Finally, create 3-year objectives. Now, I know you might not know enough about a generosity ministry today to even begin to think about what 3 years might look like. But I want to relieve a little bit of pressure. Let me give you some examples of what I mean by 3-year objectives. In year 1, you could merely have a couple of goals. One would say, we're going to focus on the launch, and we want to really launch this ministry well. And you could have several weeks, months just in planning and preparation with your cross-functional team. Another item in the first year is just to establish a positive culture related to the topic. You know, money might not be the most positive conversation in church life, either because you haven't addressed it at all, or maybe because there's some challenges of the past, or maybe just some misperceptions. So your biggest goal in the first year might just be to redeem the topic so you can build upon it in years to come. Another goal you might want to accomplish in year 1 is to help people identify with the generosity path givers. If you've been through the training on the generosity cycle, we talk about 5 different kinds of givers, from a beginning giver to an extravagant giver. In the very first year, just getting people to identify with one of those givers, commit to growing, and have some Bible heroes to model themselves after could be an amazing win in your very first year. Year 2, you might move on to aligning your budget in ministries. As we've mentioned in the training, every ministry should be involved in a generosity ministry, and your church finances should serve as a model. So some of the principles you've been teaching in your first year can now become practical alignments in your corporate ministries as a whole. Year 2, you can also do an annual generosity sermon series to get that habit and practice of the topic being regular. You can launch multiple small groups. We've created the Generosity Hub to help you with different topics, as well as some growth plans back in our generosity cycle training. You could host your very first extravagant and expanding givers event. We have some agenda items in the generosity cycle related to helping people flourish with the gift of giving. Expanding and extravagant givers are 2 of our 5 givers. So in year 2, you might launch an event just for them to help them begin to grow and learn and flourish in unleashing that gift. In year 2, you could also begin transitioning from the launch team to a more permanent team. So that's year 2, very broad goals that you could easily accomplish in the course of time. Year 3, you might host your first legacy giving event. You'll remember back into our training on what is a generosity ministry, we talked about the 5 different aspects of it. One of them is legacy. So it might be your 3rd year when you create your very first legacy event. You can conduct your annual sermon series as usual, expand your small group offerings, and then you'll be able to celebrate enthusiastically what God is doing. Now, all along the way, you'll be able to celebrate, but you'll be getting more and more freedom, more and more results, and more willingness to celebrate, and your people will cheer. So listen, God talks about generosity being joy-filled. Getting to the point of celebrating generosity is extremely important, and year 3, you should be able to unleash that. Finally, let's talk about resources. What resources are available to you? You don't have to go out there and figure out where they are. If you go to lifeway.com/generosity, we have many resources in the terms of stewardship, finances, and generosity for you. I want you to rely on the generosity cycle. It is a year-long worth of training, as if a stewardship pastor or generosity pastor was on your team. Take those tools right into your meeting and lean on them. Let us help you lead. Remember, you have the generosity pathway, which describes 5 types of givers, and we have some tools related to a growth plan. Remember the Generosity Hub. Additionally, we have blog posts, webinars, podcasts, and network events, all that are no cost to you. Utilize those for your own training, the training of your team, and for the training of your staff. Now, some important tips as we close. Remember, you're just starting. You're not launching a campaign or a class. You're trying to grow a culture. Be patient. Spend a lot of time thinking and planning before you launch. Then be patient as you're growing one step at a time. Remember, we have some practical applications to help you process what you've been learning. Enjoy those as you go through this training. Feel free to share them with your team.